Okay, this is my third try at this video, so hopefully everything works out this time. Anyway, I'm Jeffrey. Welcome to Love and Other Arts, where I want to help you master whatever art you are practicing, especially it's the art of loving, but all other arts too. I'll give you, um, advice that can help you with any art you're practicing. And today I want to talk specifically about poetry. Um, so story time first. I The other day, I was going to the other end of town for band practice, but I got to the other end of town too early. So where am I going to kill some time? At the bookstore, of course. So I go to the bookstore and I go to the poetry section, and I'm sure many of you can relate to what happened. The poetry section at my bookstore over the last several years has A, gotten smaller, and B, it's like 90% Insta poetry now. And I'm not necessarily here to knock Insta poetry, but it used to be that you could find a pretty reasonable selection of different poets from different times and some anthologies, and now it's mostly Insta poetry. But I still check it. I still check the poetry section, and every now and then I find something nice. And this day, I found something very nice. So let me show you this book. Um, Poetry Says It Better by Ellen Burstyn. Burstyn. I'm not actually sure how you say it. Um, this might be the most important book for poetry in 2026. Let me tell you about what it is. Um, it's not a book of poetry. It's a book about poetry. Um, well, I guess that's not true that it's not a book of poetry. There's lots of poems in it. It is like an anthology, but it's an anthology with It's an anthology that's not written by a poet or by a scholar, but simply by someone who loves poetry. In fact, the author is a famous actress, I guess. I recognized the names of all of her movies when I read them, but I haven't seen them. So I don't know her from her actressing. Maybe many of you do. Like maybe as soon as I said her name, you guys were like, oh, yeah, of course. um, so this book is incredible. I'm so glad I bought it. Um, she just it's part poetry anthology and also a little bit memoir, right? So she like kind of walks through how she found poems the first time and what poems meant a lot to her growing up and at different points in her life. And it's she's very clear that her intention is to write a book that would persuade people who don't enjoy poetry yet that there's something in poetry for them to enjoy. And I just think that's incredible because one of the biggest takeaways from this book is that you don't have to study poetry. You can. I love to study poetry, but it's also possible to just enjoy poetry the same way you enjoy music, right? It's great to study music too. I study music and poetry, but like not every time that you put a CD in the car or every time you pick up a book are you trying to study. Sometimes you're just trying to enjoy. And I think that it's lost on our culture that you can just enjoy a poem. You don't have to be studying it. And I think that's a lot of what draws people away from poetry. And so this book is about just enjoying poetry and and how um even when you come to poetry for enjoyment, you will also take away, wisdom and powerful ideas. Again, just like music, I mean, how many of us, have had an album that we listened to over and over because we enjoyed it, and over time you learn that like, oh, some of these songs are really deep, and maybe the ones you love the most as you go through life are the ones that had that depth to it. But you didn't get that depth because you were trying to study the album. You were just listening to it. You were enjoying it, and there was wisdom there anyway. And poetry is the same way. Um, if you are not convinced that poetry can be enjoyed, if you know someone who's not convinced that poetry can be enjoyed, you've got to buy this book just right away. Um, it will change your mind. There's a great selection of poets in here, and most of it is accessible. Most of it is easy enough to read. There are some trickier ones, and actually, there's a poem that I think of as kind of trickier really early on. And so at first, I was like, "Oh, I don't know if this book is really going to work for people." Um, but after so yeah, I mean, she starts with Invictus by William Ernest Henley, and I know that's a popular poem to teach, but I just think it's a little older. The language is a little more complex than some of the other poems. So you might get to that one and think, oh man, I don't know, this is going to be too hard. But just keep going, because after that we've got some David White. David White is a contemporary poet. Um, his language is very easy to understand, but it's beautiful too, and it's profound. He's a wonderful poet, and um, soon after that, there's a lot of a modern American poet, a 20th century American poet, Edna St. Vincent Millay, and she has a very like old fashioned formal kind of style, but she really, um, it's just different when you're reading a poem by someone who lived 100 years ago versus a poem by someone who lived like 400 years ago. I mean, you just more of it comes to you more easily. Um, and then yeah, throughout the book, most of the poetry is very accessible, very easy. But she is going to throw you some extra challenges too. I mean, there's some Rilke in the book. There are some foreign poets who have been translated, and those can be a little trickier in some places, but most of it is very accessible reading. You're gonna enjoy this book. It's fun, um, and it's gonna open your eyes to some new things. So yeah, one more time, I'll put it on screen. You guys gotta check out Poetry Says It Better by Ellen Burstyn. Can't recommend it highly enough. Turn some poetry skeptics in your life into poetry fanatics. And also, I mean, I already loved poetry, and I read this book and I got so much out of it still. Like she's insightful about poetry, and not again in like a scholarly way. Like she's not going to break down the poems and be like, "Oh, did you notice, this use of that technique?" I mean, maybe just a little bit. There's a little bit of that, but that's not the main thing. The main thing is, man, did you notice how wise that was? And great book, highly recommend. Tell all your friends, all of them, all of your friends. All right, guys, I'll see you next time. I think that's all I have to say about it.